Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something that's, well, generating a lot of buzz. Microsoft 365 Copilot.
Right.
For those of you just starting to hear about it, um, it might seem a little futuristic, an AI assistant right there in your familiar work tools.
Yeah, definitely.
Our goal today is really to look past the hype and clearly explain what it is and how organizations can begin to wrap their heads around getting started.
Exactly. We've gone through a whole bunch of Microsoft Learn articles, which are,
Mhm.
the official guides for understanding Copilot.
Okay.
Think of this as your entry point, really. The essential information you need to grasp the fundamentals of this technology and the initial steps to consider.
We want to provide those aha moments, right? Make it click without getting bogged down in super technical language.
Precisely. Keep it accessible for beginners.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What is Microsoft 365 Copilot in simple terms? It feels like a term that could mean, well, a lot of different things.
Yeah, it can seem broad, but at its heart, it's an AI-powered tool designed simply to make you more productive.
Oh, okay.
The really interesting part, I think, is where it works. It's deeply connected to two key Microsoft systems.
Right.
First, there's the Microsoft Graph.
Mm-hmm.
Think of that as basically holding all your organization's data, your emails, chats, documents, calendars, all that stuff.
Your internal universe of information.
Kind of, yeah. And second, it's integrated directly into the Microsoft 365 apps you use every single day.
Like Word, Excel.
Exactly. Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Teams, even newer things like Loop. It lives right there.
So it's not just pulling random information from the internet, it's specifically working with our organization's information within our apps.
That's the key difference.
Yeah.
Precisely. And because of this tight integration, it can offer real-time intelligent help.
Help with what specifically?
Well, boosting creativity, improving productivity, even helping you learn new skills. Think of it as having access to both knowledge.
Knowledge
Like understanding and summarizing information,
Yeah.
maybe recalling details from a meeting you missed, even doing translations.
Okay.
And also skills like predicting what you might need next or generating initial drafts of content like an email or a presentation outline.
Right. So it's scoped in a way. It's designed to help with specific business processes using your own data.
You've got it. That's a good way to put it.
That sounds incredibly useful. Now, for someone listening who's thinking, okay, this sounds interesting, but what do we actually need in place to even consider using it? What are the absolute must-haves?
Yes, the prerequisites. That's the crucial first step, really. There are several key things.
Okay.
Firstly, your organization needs to be using Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise.
Okay, the subscription level.
Yes, and importantly, these need to be the most recent cloud-connected versions of apps like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook. And they need to be kept updated. Copilot relies on that modern foundation.
Got it. So if you're still on like Office 2016 perpetual license, that won't cut it. It needs to be the subscription cloud-aware version.
Exactly. That cloud connection is vital.
Right.
What else? Well, you'll also need to have eligible base licenses for your users.
Base licenses.
Yeah, things like Microsoft 365 E3 or E5, Office 365 E3 or E5, or the A3, A5 versions for faculty, or even Microsoft 365 Business Standard or Business Premium.
Okay, so one of those core plans.
Right. And this is a really important point. Copilot is an add-on to these existing licenses. You need both the base license and the Copilot license.
Okay. So you can't just purchase Copilot on its own. You have to have one of those underlying Microsoft 365 subscriptions already.
Correct. You absolutely do. Then every user needs a Microsoft Entra-based account for authentication.
That's the modern Azure AD, right? The identity system.
Yeah, exactly. It was Azure AD, now Microsoft Entra ID. It's your organization's digital ID system in the cloud, basically making sure only the right people access Copilot.
Makes sense.
Also, while it's strongly recommended for just smooth collaboration, you should plan on having OneDrive accounts set up for your users, ideally with at least 1 terabyte of storage each. Copilot uses that for context.
Okay, so we're looking at a modern cloud-based Microsoft 365 setup, the right foundational subscriptions, those Entra ID accounts, and OneDrive. Anything else from a pure tech perspective?
Yes, just a few more sort of technical details that help ensure a smooth experience.
Mm.
For those interactive suggestions you might see pop up in email,
Yeah.
users will need the latest preview version of the new Outlook for Windows.
The new Outlook client specifically.
Right. And for Copilot to work within your chats, meetings, and channels, you'll need the Microsoft Teams desktop app or the web app.
Okay.
And if you plan on using Copilot in those collaborative canvases called Microsoft Loop, well, Loop needs to be activated within your organization's overall M365 setup your tenant.
Right, your tenant settings. Seems like a number of pieces need to be aligned, technically speaking. What about keeping everything up to date? That seems important.
It's absolutely key. For everything to work well together, user devices need to be on either the current channel or the monthly enterprise channel for their Microsoft 365 apps updates.
Okay, specific update channels.
Yes, this ensures they're running a version that's actually compatible with all the Copilot features as they roll out.
Got it.
Lastly, there's some specific network requirements. This is more for the IT folks.
Okay.
They'll need to make sure that your Microsoft 365 apps can establish secure connections with Microsoft services using something called WebSocket connections. The address starts with US.
WSS. Okay.
Yeah. There's a specific identifier for this, endpoint ID number 46 in the Microsoft documentation. The main thing to know is that your apps need to be able to talk back to Microsoft services in this specific way for the real-time features.
Okay. That's a pretty solid checklist for the IT department to work through. Now, let's say you have all of this in place. How do you actually get Copilot for your users? Does it just, like, appear one day?
No, not automatically. You need to assign licenses.
Ah, licensing, of course.
Yeah. Just like any other add-on service in Microsoft 365, you assign Copilot licenses on top of those eligible base licenses we talked about.
Right.
Yeah. You can do this in a few ways. There's usually a Microsoft 365 Copilot setup wizard in the admin center that guides you.
Okay.
Or you can go the standard route in the Microsoft 365 admin center. Users, active users, select a user, then licenses and apps. It's the same place you assign other licenses.
Familiar territory for admins, then.
Exactly. And if your IT team prefers automation or scripting, you can also manage these licenses using PowerShell.
Okay, options there. And the key takeaway here is really that each user who needs Copilot needs both things assigned, right?
Yeah.
One of those prerequisite base licenses and the separate Copilot license.
Yes, you absolutely cannot have one without the other for it to work. Need both assigned to the user account.
Okay, now beyond just the technical setup and getting the licenses sorted, what are some of the bigger picture things organizations should be thinking about as they prepare? It feels like it's more than just installing software.
Oh, absolutely. Much more. There's some really important organizational groundwork.
Like what kind of things are we talking about?
Well, one of the first things to consider is your existing security settings and, critically, how you manage data within Microsoft 365.
Okay.
Because Copilot is so tightly integrated with your Microsoft Graph, all that organizational data, it automatically uses the security permissions you already have set up.
Ah, so it respects existing permissions. That's good.
It is. It makes the initial security setup potentially quite straightforward. However, this also really shines a light on how crucial it is to have good habits around managing your content and strong data governance before you roll out Copilot widely.
Right, because if your permissions are a mess or the data is junk.
Exactly. Think of it this way. If your digital workspace is disorganized, Copilot might just help you find the clutter faster or surface things you didn't realize were accessible.
That's a very clear way to put it. It's like you need to make sure your house is in order before you get this super efficient new helper.
Precisely. So, good content management, good data governance first. Then think about who gets access initially. Should you just give it to everyone at once?
My gut says probably not.
And Microsoft agrees. They actually recommend a more focused approach to start.
Okay.
They suggest identifying maybe 2 or 3 key business areas or teams within your organization that heavily use Microsoft 365 apps already.
Why them specifically?
Starting there lets you concentrate your initial efforts, your training, your support, and really see the impact Copilot can have where it's most likely to be adopted quickly.
Makes sense. Maximize the initial impact.
Yeah, and it's also a good idea for those initial teams to have some specific problems or use cases they're hoping Copilot can help them solve. That way you can actually measure its effectiveness, see if it's delivering value.
So be strategic, define use cases, target the rollout. What about getting different parts of the company involved in the planning, like beyond just IT?
Yeah, that's highly recommended. Many organizations are finding value in creating what they sometimes call an AI council or something similar.
An AI council.
Yeah, basically a cross-functional team. It brings together different perspectives on how AI tools like Copilot should be adopted responsibly and effectively.
Who would be on such a council?
You typically want people from IT, definitely, But also maybe folks who specialize in change management,
Yeah.
an executive sponsor to champion the whole thing, perhaps someone from legal or risk management focusing on potential risks and ethical considerations.
That makes a lot of sense, getting input from different angles to make sure the rollout is smooth and well considered, not just a tech push.
Exactly. And speaking of change, introducing a tool like this, it's probably going to require people to adjust how they work, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Big time. It feels like a fundamental shift, potentially.
It really is.
Ah,
So change management is a critical piece here. It's important to um, gauge how people in your organization initially feel about AI.
yeah.
You'll likely see a range, right? Excitement, maybe some uncertainty, even apprehension. You also need to manage expectations. Make sure everyone understands what Copilot can do, but just as importantly, what it can't do. It's not magic.
Right. Ground it in reality.
Yes, and a key message to constantly emphasize is that the user remains in control. The human is still the pilot.
The pilot, co-pilot. I see what they did there.
Yeah. Think of it as Copilot being a helpful assistant, augmenting the human, not replacing them. The user directs, reviews, corrects.
Okay, so a targeted rollout, a cross-functional team guiding things, and a big focus on helping people adapt to this new way of working. Now, you mentioned earlier, and it seems super important, that the quality of your data is really key. Let's dig into that. How do you actually get your data ready so Copilot can give you useful results?
Okay, yes, this is absolutely fundamental. Because remember that core principle. Copilot can only access information that the individual user already has permission to see.
Right, permissions are paramount.
They are. But if that information itself is disorganized, outdated, or just plain wrong, well, that's what Copilot will be working with. Garbage in, garbage out, essentially.
So the classic GI-GO problem, amplified maybe.
Could be, yeah. So the first step is really to tackle what's often called ROT,
ROT.
redundant, outdated, and trivial content.
Ah, okay, makes sense.
This means actively reviewing your documents, emails, chats, SharePoint sites, and deleting anything that's old, inaccurate, duplicated, or just no longer needed. Spring cleaning for your digital files.
That sounds like a lot of work for some organizations.
Can be, absolutely, but it's crucial. Implementing policies for archiving and automatically deleting data after a certain time can really help manage this ongoing.
Using retention policies and things like that.
Exactly. And specifically for SharePoint, there are tools within SharePoint Advanced Management that can help identify and clean up inactive sites, which are often full of ROT.
Okay, so step one, digital cleanup. Attack the ROT. What about the content that we are keeping? How should that be structured?
Logical organization is key. Think about structuring your information within folders and SharePoint sites in a way that actually makes sense for how people work and find things.
Like not just dumping everything in one giant folder.
Please know. For instance, all your financial reports should probably live under a clear finance site or section.
Yeah.
HR policies in a dedicated HR policy site. A clear taxonomy.
Okay.
And applying metadata to your files is huge here.
Metadata like.
Things like client names, project codes, document types, status,
Oh.
structured information about the file. This significantly improves how easily Copilot can understand the context and find exactly what you're looking for.
So instead of just relying on the file name and contents, we're adding structured tags.
Precisely. Which also helps with discoverability. That leads to the next point. Tagging files with relevant keywords.
Some more tags.
Yeah, using SharePoint's managed metadata, or even just consistent labels or hashtags within documents where appropriate. It helps Copilot categorize and retrieve information more effectively.
Okay. And file names. Do they matter much anymore with Smart Search?
They still do. Establishing consistent file naming conventions is surprisingly important. Clear, descriptive names like Q3 2024 Marketing Report Final are much, much better than vague stuff like Report V2 Final.
We've all seen those.
Haven't we just? And related to that, it's a really good practice to consolidate multiple versions of the same document. Try to ensure only the latest, clearly marked, authoritative version is easily accessible to avoid confusion for both humans and AI.
Okay, clean up ROT, organize logically, use metadata, tag keywords, standardize names, consolidate versions. It sounds like a lot of this relies on people changing their habits.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
You can set up the structure, but maintaining it requires good data hygiene from everyone.
So training, guidelines.
Exactly. Providing clear training and guidelines to employees on how to name files properly, how and why to tag content, when to delete or archive old stuff. It's essential for making this stick in the long run. It needs to become part of the culture.
Right. So we've cleaned up, organized, tagged our data. We're encouraging good habits. Now, how do we make absolutely sure that sensitive information isn't suddenly accessible to everyone through Copilot? You said it respects permissions, but people might still be nervous.
That's a valid concern, and it goes back to that core principle. Copilot respects the existing permissions you have in place in Microsoft 365. It will only show a user information that they already have the rights to see based on their Entra ID and group memberships applied to that file or site.
Okay, so the underlying security model is the gatekeeper.
It is. However, introducing a powerful AI tool that can surface information very quickly is naturally a good time to double-check and reinforce your data governance practices. Make sure those permissions are actually correct and reflect the principle of least privilege.
Right, don't give access unless it's needed. What does reinforcing data governance look like in practice, especially with Copilot in mind?
Well, implementing SharePoint Advanced Management, or SAM, is highly recommended if you use SharePoint heavily.
Sam, what does that give you?
SAM provides a richer set of tools specifically for governance. Things like advanced data classification, setting stricter access policies based on sensitivity labels, ensuring compliance, and very importantly, features to help prevent accidental oversharing or excessive permissions. Think of it as giving you more granular control.
Okay, more tools for control. What else?
Assigning a formal data steward role can be really valuable.
A data steward.
Yeah, someone, or maybe a small team, whose job it is to oversee the data preparation for Copilot, help define and manage access rules, maybe assist with user training on data handling, and continuously monitor how data is being used and accessed, especially sensitive data.
So dedicated oversight.
Exactly. And finally, and this is crucial, actually document your data policies clearly. Formalize the rules.
What kind of rules?
Rules regarding how sensitive or restricted data should be handled, maybe policies around data anonymization if that's relevant, who the data steward is, what training is mandatory, how access is requested and granted, and how compliance and usage will be monitored.
And then share those policies widely.
Yes. Make sure these policies are easily accessible to everyone, understood and reviewed and updated regularly as things change. It builds trust and clarity.
So it's really not just about flipping on the Copilot switch. It's about ensuring that technology, the data, the permissions, the policies, and the people are all aligned.
That's it exactly. It's a holistic approach.
Now, you mentioned very briefly earlier that site owners can control what Copilot can search. Can you explain that distinction again between controlling search and permissions?
Sure. It's a two-layered thing, essentially. At a high level, the owner of a SharePoint site has the ability to control whether the content within their specific site is included in search results at all. This is often called indexing. They can effectively hide the whole site from search if needed.
Okay, so they can take a whole area off the map for search.
Right. However, and this is the critical distinction, even if a site's content is indexed and searchable, the permissions that are set on the individual files, folders, and items within that site are what ultimately determine what any given user can actually see in those search results.
Ah,
This filtering based on individual user permissions is called security trimming. It happens automatically based on who you are.
so indexing is about whether it can be found at all by the system, but security trimming is about whether you specifically are allowed to see it once it's found.
Perfect. That's exactly it. So while site owners control the broad searchability, the existing permissions you've set up are what ensure users only ever see the specific data they are actually authorized to access.
That makes perfect sense. It's like saying this entire library building is open, but you still need the right library card and clearance to access the rare books room.
That's a great analogy. Exactly like that.
Okay, so to kind of summarize for our beginners listening in, getting started with Microsoft 365 Copilot, it really involves a few key areas we've covered.
Yeah, I think so.
You need to ensure you have that right technical foundation, the modern Microsoft 365 environment, the specific apps, the correct licenses.
Right. The prerequisites we listed.
But just as important, maybe even more so, is taking that strategic approach to how you roll it out. Targeting specific groups first, having clear goals,
Focusing on change management, helping your employees adapt and understand the tool.
and, crucially, putting in the work beforehand to get your data organized, cleaned up, properly permissioned, and governed effectively. That seems absolutely non-negotiable for good results.
It really is. It's not just about deploying a new piece of software. It's about preparing your organization, your data, your people, your processes for a new way of working. And that requires a thoughtful and well-planned approach.
Definitely.
So, to bring it all together, Microsoft 365 Copilot is clearly a powerful AI tool. It has huge potential to significantly boost productivity and creativity.
No doubt.
But as we've explored today, a successful start really hinges on understanding these basics. The technical requirements, yes, but also the licensing process, and especially that foundational work involved in preparing your organizational data. It's not magic. It's intelligent assistance built on a well-managed foundation.
And this deep dive has really aimed to provide that foundational understanding, hopefully, for those of you who are just beginning to explore this topic. We've tried to focus on clarity and providing actionable insights without getting, lost in the weeds of overly technical jargon.
Hopefully we hit that mark. So maybe here's something to think about as we wrap up. As AI tools like Copilot become increasingly integrated into our daily workflows, which seems inevitable,
Feels like it, yeah.
how might our fundamental approaches to how we work, and perhaps even more significantly, how we manage our vast amounts of organizational data, how do those things need to continue to evolve?
That's a big question.
It is. It really highlights the ongoing, perhaps even increasing, importance of data quality, clear organization, and carefully controlling who has access to what in this emerging AI-driven landscape. The foundations become even more critical.
Absolutely. Something for everyone to consider. And if you listening are interested in learning more after this, we definitely encourage you to maybe investigate your own organization's Microsoft 365 subscription level. See where you stand on those prerequisites.
Yeah, and explore the Microsoft Learn resources we've implicitly referenced today. They have tons of detailed guides.
Or perhaps just start a conversation internally. Identify individuals within your company who might be good candidates to be early testers and champions of Copilot when the time comes.
Good next steps.
Wow.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Indeed. Until our next exploration, take care, everyone.